Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Recently, we did a video that looked at some of the most affordable starships in the Star Wars galaxy. This is a video targeting individuals who are looking to escape from their terrible situation / planet, and were trying to seek glory, fortune, and spice in the far corners of the universe. I believe that ultimately individuals who are able to uproot their lives and move towards greener pastures are the key to the survival and growth of any people. And so in that video, we mainly looked at hyperdrive-equipped starfighters and freighters that one could buy used for a pretty reasonable price. Today, we're going to fast forward a little bit and look at that same hypothetical shipbuilder, but more into the future. Our downtrodden moisture farmer has escaped his destitute home planet in the Outer Rim by putting together an old scavenged Y-Wing. And now he heads towards the riches of the core. He finds himself in the midst of the spoiled and elite of Coruscant. Well, actually, he just stays on the surface for a second. That's because he probably can't afford anything above level 1313. But unlike those who were born on the higher levels of Coruscant, this individual was born into a life of struggle. I mean, moisture farmers have to squeeze moisture out of the air to survive. Surely clocking in a few 80-hour work weeks in a factory isn't gonna kill him. And so a decade later, through sheer determination and discipline, our humble moisture farmer is now the owner of the very factory he started working at when he first arrived. It really does bring tears to my eyes when I see someone achieve their own Coruscant dream. Sure, most people in the galaxy don't get their own Coruscant dream, but that's not our problem, or his problem. I guess the only thing he has to worry about now is how to spend his credits. I mean, sure, he's kept that old Y-Wing to remind himself of where he came from, but he also wants an upgrade. And so today, we'll be highlighting some of the fanciest and most expensive starfighters you can purchase for your credits. In order to make this most prestigious list, manufacturers have to produce a starfighter that's worth, at a minimum, of 200,000 credits. If you've seen our previous video on the cost of Rebel and Imperial starships, you'll know that a standard TIE Fighter costs only 50,000, or a quarter of that. It's like comparing a fascist Hyundai Elantra with a entry-level supercar. And that's exactly what our first starfighter is, the N1 from Naboo. Which honestly reminds me of an Italian supercar so much. When Pelimoto pulled back the sheets revealing what looked like a pretty gutted N1 starfighter, I, like many of you, started geeking out. Although my level of nerdiness went immediately beyond the nostalgia of seeing a prequel ship post-Empire. What I saw was a classic beauty of a starfighter, one that I knew was extremely valuable and held its value throughout the decades, especially if it's restored properly. Now, obviously, the hack job that Pelimoto and Dinjarin did to this N1 is more Mad Max than classic auto show worthy. But at its core, Mando's starship still had the same space frame and excellent J-type engines on it, which were essentially just downscaled versions of the engines used on Royal Naboo yachts. At 200,000 credits per unit, the N1 starfighter barely makes our list. Although, given the fact that most of these starfighters were assembled by the Theed Palace Space Vessel Engineering Corps and only a handful were built, I would argue that this ship is also a collector piece, and a fully restored N1 starfighter 50 years down the road could cost twice as much as its original price. The T-65B X-Wing is most people's favorite starfighter in Star Wars, and it's pretty easy to see why that is. But it was actually 3 times the price of a TIE Fighter, making it a very expensive and well-equipped starship for a mainline fighter. And that's because the Rebels valued quality over quantity. Aside from some minor aesthetic changes, the T-85 X-Wing represents the newest version of the X-Wing family of starships. It boasted more powerful engines, shields, and flight systems, allowing the aging X-Wing design to still be relevant during the First Order versus Resistance War. Some might argue that the T-70 X-Wing and even the original T-65B was still relevant during this conflict, and since the Resistance was a paramilitary force, many of its pilots actually flew these older models. Resistance ace Poe Dameron, for instance, flew a T-70 X-Wing, which cost around 200,000 credits. The T-85 X-Wing cost 220,000 credits. Before we continue though, a word from our sponsor for today's video, Onasaber.com. Once again, we had the Cypher Blade. Now, this is one of Onasaber.com's dueling blades. This means it's a little simpler in design, lighter, and better balanced. And it looks amazing. It kind of gives off a Sith vibe with its sleek black handle and claw-like guards, which surrounds the emitter assembly. What makes this thing even cooler is that it's durable enough to really whack, because this is designed for sparring and practicing. The The Cypher has many of the same features that their premium Xenopixel line has, like customized color, sound effects, and different types of blade modes. From now until February 28th, the Cypher blade will be available for purchase for 30% off. And with our discount code MEOW, that's all caps, you'll get an additional 10% off. For more information, check out our link below. The extremely awkward ASF-01 B-Wing from Slain and Corporal fit a very interesting niche within the Rebel Alliance Navy. This was a fighter designed to use its massive firepower to take out capital ships. It had on board multiple SW-7A ion cannons, a R-9X heavy laser cannon, and 2 MG-9 torpedo launchers. Additional bolt-on weapons and placements could be attached to the multiple hardpoints on the ship's command pod. At 220,000 credits, the B-Wing was one of the most expensive Rebel starfighters deployed during the Galactic Civil War. But whenever one of these ships took out a multi-million credit Imperial light cruiser, for instance, then all of a sudden the cost of the B-Wing doesn't seem to matter that much. Okay, our next ship, the Geonosian Solar Sailor, is technically not a starfighter, but it does seem to be the same size as your typical starfighter, so we'll include it in this list. Most famously used by Count Dooku, leader of the Separatist Alliance, this luxury star yacht was minimalistic, sleek, and elegant in its design. You're going to find creature comforts on the Prunwarka 116 class interstellar sloop that you definitely won't find in an X-Wing cockpit. As a matter of fact, the ship even comes with its own droid pilot. But what makes this ship so special is in its name, the gigantic solar sail that allows the ship to fly at ridiculous sublight speeds. The ship essentially had a large parachute-like device that could catch and ride the solar winds, and while the Solar Sailor does not accelerate very quickly at first, you can reach sublight speeds that match and maybe even surpass that of an X-Wing. And while the ship doesn't have any weapons on board, it does have a triple-layered shield system, which is very robust for a civilian ship. At 240,000 credits, the Prunwarka 116 class interstellar sloop will set you back quite a lot of money. But on the bright side, the solar sails means that you'll never have to fill up your fuel tank again. Towards the end of the Galactic Empire's reign, the Imperial Navy began experimenting with much more capable TIE fighter designs. Grand Admiral Thrawn ends up building the TIE Defender after struggling to capture and destroy a Rebel cell in the Lothal sector. The TIE Defender was an extremely potent starfighter and a game-changer for the Empire. Equipped with shields, a ridiculous amount of firepower, including 8 forward-facing lasers and a proton torpedo launcher, the TIE Defender made quick work of every Rebel fighter it encountered, including the X-Wing. Had the Empire had more time, had Thrawn not been swept away by space whales, perhaps the TIE Defender could have changed the course of the war. Of course, it did cost 300,000 credits per unit, which is twice as much as an X-Wing and 6 times as much as a TIE fighter. The elite version of the TIE Defender costs even more at 310,000 credits. Now, the First Order might look like a copy-paste of the Empire, but I think that's an oversimplification. The First Order is really just the Imperial Remnant, an organization that has learned from the mistakes of the Empire. Well, not completely, obviously, but when it comes to starfighter designs, they definitely learned a lot. They added shields and even some hyperdrives to their standard TIE fighters. This is also because the First Order had some manpower issues, and throwing away pilots in disposable starfighters seems like a terrible idea. The TIE Silencer represents everything the First Order learned about the old TIE line. You can see previous influences in its design. It has the S-foils of a TIE Interceptor, a similar space frame to a TIE Advance X1, and it also has the functionality of a TIE Defender. At 310,000 credits, the TIE Silencer was extremely expensive. It was also rolled out in limited numbers, and as per Imperial tradition, only ace pilots were allowed to test these prototype ships. Now we're going to travel back a few thousand years back to the Old Republic period. You know, when they still had a standing navy. The R-class starfighter was designed after the Great Sith War as a part of the Republic's Generation Tomorrow Starfighter initiative to replace the aging Star Saber XC-01 fighter. The ARC was sleek and delta-shaped. It featured foldable S-foils and was well equipped with weapon shields and a hyperdrive, despite its tiny size. Legends say that Quad Systems engineering was inspired by the ARC design when they built the Delta 7 Ether Sprite and A-Wing. As a matter of fact, the first designated A-Wing in Star Wars is the ARC-class tactical fighter. That's what it was called. But to put so much tech into such a small package cost quite a lot of money. You're basically dealing with the same problems that laptop designers have to deal with when they're making a very thin gaming laptop with like a dedicated memory card, which is also why if you ever go winter camping, guys, and you don't want to bring an open flame into your tent, just bring your laptop and play some video games. It will heat up the place immediately. It's estimated that a single Orc-class tactical strike fighter was worth more than 360,000 credits. What's even more impressive is that the Orc Starfighter, which served from the beginning of the Mandalorian Wars to the end of the New Sith Wars and the Ruusan Reformation. This means that this starship served the Republic for 4,000 consecutive years. I mean, sure, they upgraded a little bit, but that is crazy. Like our previous ship, the Firespray 31 class patrol and attack craft was also quite rare. Only 6 of them were manufactured as well. The most famous of those would be Jango and Boba Fett's Slave 1. After the Slave 1 was stolen, the manufacturers and Quad Systems Engineering scraped the entire program. Now, what makes the Firespray 31 class patrol and attack craft so desirable is the legend that the Fetts built around it. All across the galaxy, Mandalorians and want-to-be bounty hunters would view the Firespray as the ultimate symbol of being a badass. Although in Legends, Quad Systems Engineering eventually would bring back the Firespray because of all of the demand. As of now, we don't have a price for the Firespray 31, but I'm sure high demand continues to drive up the price. So there you have it, guys. Those are some of the most expensive starfighters in the galaxy. Let me know in the comment section below which one you would choose to fly around the galaxy in. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.